we'd go on 2-week jungle patrols up to the Guinean border, the Sierra Leone border, the Ivory Coast border for 2 weeks, just your platoon. And I had a couple of hairy moments on that tour where the country was just finished full-on civil war, as in neighboring civil war into Sierra Leone as well. The war officially had ended, as in parties, all the groups had come together and say no more civil war. But all those groups for the last 10 years have just been bandits. So now they're not rebels anymore. They just became criminals, So you still were dealing with all these, a lot of times you'd have child soldiers, teens, who, they knew nothing else. So they just kept the criminality. And there were times when we had to go in and deal with it, especially up in some of the rubber plantations where the government then was trying to take back its assets to get an economy going. But some of these groups had just taken over, the criminal groups, and were selling it themselves. And there was a few times, I'll always remember my first time was when my platoon sergeant at the time turned around to me and said, "What do we do now, sir?" And it was that massive light bulb moment for me. It was like, oh my God, I'm in charge.
What was the option? What were your options?
So look, thankfully we never had any made like firefights around. There was a couple of other hairy incidents. I won't get into them, but a few times, like how to approach a group of armed teenagers who are significantly under the influence of substances, and when the senior guy in your platoon turns around to you and says, "I don't know what to do here. What do you think? What are we going to do now?" It was at that point I kind of meant what, not just being what an officer meant, what an officer is, but it's what a leader is. And it's what our preconceived notions of leadership, sometimes that comes at age, that the older you are, the more of a leader you are. It's not that, it's your position in whatever organization you're working in. And it's happen to make the decisions. Like you've probably heard that phrase, like the loneliness of command, the loneliness of management. It doesn't matter if it's business or military. It is quite lonely when you've multiple eyes, both younger than you, as guys on their first tour, or you've got corporals and sergeants looking at you with multiple tours going, you make the call. So we had a couple of incidents where we had to disarm some people and stuff like that, but it all worked out fine. But it was a huge wake-up moment for me from reading about leadership, being trained in leadership, to actually leading.